Dr. Sani Aliyu joins us next. He's the National Coordinator of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, we just heard from the Chairman of House Committee on Public Accounts on this particular matter. But from the presentations that were made yesterday, did you feel that there were some gray areas that were left out that still needs clarification?
Good morning. As the Honorable said, we received, it's pretty clear really, the role of the PTF, we have a multi-sectoral responsibility, okay? So we have a host of ministries and departments that are part of the PTF, and people are given responsibility in terms of their own budget line. They then make a report to us, and they provide us with all the evidence in terms of whether they have procured or they have spent money. And that level of evidence needs to be the same level of evidence they would need to pay. And we will then make a recommendation to the Accountant General to pay the money. At the moment, as far as I know, only 169 million or so was spent by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on the evacuation of Nigerians, mainly on their accommodation. So we've got about 22 billion that was released to the PTF. And just to make it clear, the PTF is not a procuring body at all. At the moment, that's less than 0.002%. And the reason why we haven't spent so much is because of the need for prudency in the first place. We need to have clear evidence. A lot of the MDAs are yet to do their full procurement. A lot of the MDAs are still using some of their 2020 budget for their normal activities. As far as I'm concerned, there's no problem here. The probing that you keep on talking about, this isn't a probe, it's a conversation. So we need to be very, very careful. We're in a pandemic situation. We're trying as much as we can to make sure that the scarce resources we have are being used appropriately. The 22 billion that we talk about, it's still there. It's still there. It's still with the Accountant General. And as far as we are concerned in the PTF, we'll make sure that whatever funds are provided to the PTF for the purpose of the COVID pandemic are used judiciously. But more importantly, we will pay if there's evidence and if it's very clear that the right thing has been done.
Well, since you say that, I mean, as far as you're concerned, there isn't any problem as of now, do you think it was too early for the Public Accounts Committee and others to ask questions now?
Well, it's relatively fairly early days, but then that's their responsibility. I believe in being preemptive. Yes, it's a good thing that the conversation is being held now so that we can work together to make sure that the money is spent appropriately. So, for instance, we had a meeting with the Auditor General of the Federation, and I have a meeting with them this morning in my office later on. And the pure purpose is we want somebody from the Auditor General's office to embed within the PTF so that to make sure that every payment request that comes in is appropriately checked before payment is done, a prepayment audit. And that's one of the ways to ensure that checks are done in the system and that any money that is being paid for a purpose that it's supposed to have been spent for. So yes, to spend only 0.002% of the money that has been released so far suggests that we're still very much in the early phase. But as Honorable Wale Oke said, we're working together. At the end of the day, what we want is to make sure that the pandemic we've gotten on top of the pandemic as soon as possible. But the money that is being given to the PTF couldn't be used any more judiciously. We are fairly strict in our rules. We make sure that the budget lines are very clear to the ministries, and we tell them to make sure that they do the right thing. And once they do the right thing and they have all the evidence, all the receipts, etc., of course, we will recommend to the Accountant General. The money doesn't sit with us; it still sits with the government. It's just that it has been made available. And just to clarify from the private sector side, because there's a lot of noise in the background, COVID is not part of the government budget system. This is a private sector arrangement. They have their money. I think they have 30-something billion or so. They will spend the money based on their own arrangements. The only thing that we can do is we can influence them to say, look, we need PPE over there, or can you set us an isolation facility over there? But the money doesn't come to us, and we are not responsible for the money at all, okay?
Does the PTF COVID-19 have any supervisory role on any funds that doesn't come directly to your committee as far as this COVID-19 tackling is concerned? I don't know if you can hear me, Doctor. Does your committee, PTF COVID-19, the committee you coordinate, does that committee have any supervisory role on all funds that have to do with COVID-19, the tackling of COVID-19 in Nigeria, including the one that you mentioned, the COVID funds? Any supervisory role at all, any oversight role?
No, we don't. We don't. So there are several funding streams. We've got the UN single basket system, of which we are on the board. The Honorable Minister of Health and myself are on the board of the UN single basket. We also have COVID, as I said. We have the NMPC downstream or upstream sector, and a host of other voluntary organizations. Our only role in these cases is to help them take the decisions as to what they should spend their money on. We can advise them, but we don't have a supervisory role at all. The money will not come to us. The only money that is outside the normal budget system that eventually comes to government is about 850 million, which were donations that were made directly through commercial banks, and they go to the CBN. They are mopped up. At the moment, I think it's about 850 million. But even then, that money hasn't come to us. It's government that will collect that money and over time. And this is money from Nigerians. And I think there was a committee of House of Representatives and the Bua Cement Group and a few others that pay the money into specific commercial banks. And that money is regularly mopped up by the Accountant General. At the moment, it's about 850 million so far. And that goes into the Treasury. So that in the future, if there's a need for further funds to be given to the PTF could draw from that. But at the moment, it's not even available to us.
If I could follow up on that, and in the future as well, in order for all of this to be put in proper perspective and clarified, would you suggest that at the end of the day, that all of these funds and how they've been utilized be published? I'm asking Dr. Aliyu that at the end of the day, and in order to put all of this in perspective and take away any spotlight unnecessarily, would you encourage or support that the funds being utilized for COVID-19 be published?
Well, of course, this is part of the normal budgeting process. Remember, as I said, the PTF is a multi-sectoral body. The money still goes to those MDAs. It's part of the normal budgeting system. The National Assembly will appropriate it. The money will go to those. So, for instance, the money that goes to Federal Ministry of Health, they have a series of budget lines. The main role of the PTF is to make sure that those budget lines fit in with the COVID pandemic, and then they go ahead and do their normal processes. But they will have to do their retirements in the normal way. I think in terms of checks, PTF is probably one of the most heavily scrutinized of all committees of government at the moment, and rightly so, because of the amount of funds and the importance of the COVID pandemic. But it's important, I think it's extremely important for the public to realize that the funds that are coming to us are appropriated to the relevant MDAs. We have a supervisory role. We're a start and finish task group. At the moment, we have a lifespan of 6 months, unless it's extended. There is a need for us to provide a final report when we finish. We are already in the process of preparing a midterm report. We've only spent 0.002% of the 22 billion that's been released so far. And we have clear-cut plans, including plans to strengthen the health system over the next few months so that when the pandemic goes away, the health system will be in a much better state to respond. But at the moment, I don't think that's an issue. But as I said, it's great that the Public Accounts Committee are engaging with us. We already have people within the financial side, both from the Ministry of Finance and the Auditor General and the Accountant General's office, that are working with us. And we will only spend money if it is absolutely necessary, if it is relevant to the COVID response, and if we have clear evidence that that money has been judiciously allocated and used, we will then recommend for the payment. It's not a problem.
Well, Dr. Aliyu, I mean, speaking of which, now that you've spoken about the health sector should be better at the end of the day, shouldn't we be looking to have, could it be maybe national hospital standard facility in different regions of the country, or should we have at least standardized world-class facility, having identified the challenge that the health sector is facing at the end of this period?
So you're quite right. In fact, the bulk of the money that's going to help is there's a plan for us to have a 40 or 45 bed isolation and treatment facility built in every federal teaching hospital or federal medical center in every state. We also have a plan for a 10-bed ICU linked to the isolation and treatment center. There's a plan to strengthen the molecular labs across the country. And there's a plan to test, I think, 4.1 million Nigerians, of which about 1 million test kits will be bought on by the federal government. So most of these funds will be used really to strengthen the health system in the long term rather than in the short term. What we are interested in is to make sure that there is a very strong legacy left post-pandemic. At the moment, the operational side of COVID is being supported not only by the federal government, but also by our other partners and the state government. The bulk of the operational spending, in fact, comes from the state governments, because they are the ones responsible for running the rapid response team, the state emergency operating centers. They are the ones that are responsible for contact tracing. We just provide them with the kits when it comes to the laboratory tests, but they pay for the normal day-to-day running of the labs. And the NCDC has only 2 labs, as far as I know, that they are in charge of directly. So yes, this is an opportunity for the country to make sure that our health system is strengthened, and to make sure that we have moving forward future pandemics, or even things like Lassa, for instance, or Ebola, God forbid, we will be in a much better state to manage this.
Okay, just give us a few more minutes. We'll be back and wrap up this. Please stay with us. All right, welcome back as we wind down with Dr. Sani Aliyu, National Coordinator of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. Could you speak to this new evacuation protocol, which we understand you say that Nigerians have got to test negative before they're before they're allowed to board? Is that right? Because some other countries, whether you're negative or positive, as long as you're a national of that country, they bring you back.
Well, so the policy we introduced, which I spoke about, yes.
Okay, Dr. Ali, just a moment. Let's just try and reconnect. Let's start that again. I'm sorry that because it's just the audio there was coming in muffled. So, yes, he'll be speaking to that in just a moment, though.
It's not possible to say that sound can have COVID, because that's the way, if you remember the way I guess spoke yesterday. But you know, the issue that we just raised now is actually quite germane, because, you know, it's part of what we discussed earlier about the distrust and all of that. You know, people want to see how government takes care of its own. Mm-hmm. You know, how well we take care of our own is actually an image, because, you know, there's that general plastic opinion that many people have. As far as they are concerned, Nigeria doesn't care about me. Why should I care? You know, you go to many embassies, many high commissions all over the world. The kind of reports that we get, they are not really very, very.
But you know, they've evacuated, they brought back different batches
from different parts of Nigeria,
about
the world.
There's Saudi Arabia, there's London, New York. But Dr. Ali, well, I'll just let me just rephrase that. Speak to us about that new evacuation protocol. Why is it that, I mean, correct us if we're wrong, that Nigerians have got to test negative before they're allowed to board, to be brought back? Because in some other countries, I mean, from the ones we know, whether you're negative or positive, you should come back home if they want to.
So let me just clarify. So there are countries that do test pre-boarding. India, for instance, does pre-test boarding. Yes, I agree for some of the European countries, you do not test before boarding, but when you arrive, you are isolated for a period of time, so like the UK. So there are mixed methods. What we are trying to do as a country is, we know in terms of the level of our epidemic, we are currently in a degree of community transmission, but there's still a lot more COVID outside Nigeria than there is within Nigeria. We're trying as much as we can to make sure that we minimize the risk of importation of COVID into Nigeria, while at the same time making it as easy as possible for us to clear the 4,000 plus Nigerians that are currently outside the country. In fact, the figure could be as much as 7,000. In the past, the main limitations we've had in terms of the flight has to do with the arrangement for accommodation by government. It's very expensive. Even the rich countries cannot afford to bring a large number of people in, put them in hotels for 14 days, feed them, look after them for the 14 days. The amount of money that we have been given estimates of through the Foreign Affairs in terms of how much we cost, I can build 4 to 5 isolation and treatment facilities. So we've got to make the best judicious use of our public resources. And this is why we said there are 2 conditions when you apply. One is that you should make sure that you have a COVID PCR test done, and this needs to be done within a 2-week period for it to be valid. Secondly, when you arrive, you will be the flights will be coming into Lagos and Abuja. We hope to start the flights we've already signed off, the protocol has been signed off yesterday evening by the PTF. So flights can actually come in as soon as they are ready. There's no longer that suspension that's been completely lifted. But when they do come in, they'll come through Lagos and Abuja, and we will ask the Nigerians that are coming in to stay within Lagos and Abuja and have a repeat test within a 72-hour window. This is because we know that if you're tested during the incubation phase, if you get a negative result, that negative result has no value, because during the incubation period of the illness, the PCR test won't be negative. So this is a belt and braces approach, while at the same time try as much as possible to clear this issue. Because the PTF, the primary responsibility of the PTF is to deliver on the pandemic. It's not to sort out issues such as evacuation, but we had to come in because there are more and more Nigerians out there. Some have been outside the country and stranded for months on end, and we need to bring them in. And these are our citizens. So how do we bring them in the most cost-effective and judicious manner for public resources? So a lot of the passengers at the moment outside actually have their COVID test done. The only thing is whether we don't know whether it's within the 14-day period or not. And when they do come in, we will repeat the test within a 3-day window so that we know whether they are infected. If they are not infected, we'll just ask them to self-isolate at home, or to arrange, if they don't have a home within Abuja or Lagos, they arrange for their own alternative accommodation. Because after all, there's still an interstate restriction. I can't leave Abuja because of the interstate restriction. So when people arrive in Lagos and Abuja, they have to stay in Lagos and Abuja anyway for the period of the self-isolation. But more importantly, we are asking people to take personal responsibility for their own health and also that of the public. This is what is done in other countries. We have to trust our fellow countrymen. If we ask people to stay at home and isolate after returning from abroad, we hope they will. And they will be signing an undertaking as well before they get onto the flight that they will follow all the necessary precautions we have set down. But this is international practice. Nigeria will not be the only country that's requesting for a COVID PCR test before coming in. It's entirely pragmatic. I think we've simplified the process, and we hope that we will be able to get as many as more than 1,000 Nigerians coming in on a weekly basis, so that over the next 3 to 4 weeks, we will clear the entire 4,000. And if there's an additional 3,000, we'll deal with it as well.
Oh, okay. When you say that they have to do that test and come with the results and show you, I mean, yeah, clearly this is new. What happens in the event, being hypothetical now, in the event that someone tests, the result is negative, and then he boards, he arrives home, and he shows is positive? What do you do in that case?
Well, what we do is we will subject the person to the same process as you would if you were tested positive today, which is to link you up with NCDC, the case management side. They will take you in for isolation. If you need treatment, you'll be treated. 80% of people will not require any treatment. With Lagos at the moment, they have a home isolation policy, so they will check your home and make sure that you have the capacity to self-isolate at home, and they will monitor your symptoms. Remember that when people board the flight, there will still be the normal rules around flights are going to change. So people will have to wear masks throughout the period of the flight, gel their hands. A lot of the seats will be taken out, so there will be physical distancing, etc. So still, the risk is significantly minimized in terms of transmission to others. What we have noticed is the highest risk of transmission actually has to do with deportees because of the way they are bunched together for a prolonged period in the same environment before they are transported over to Nigeria. But for normal visitors, the risk of transmission is very low if you put all these mitigating circumstances. For infection control, what you try to do is to mitigate the risk. It's very difficult to eliminate the risk altogether, but we are fairly confident if you have a PCR test done before you board and you come in and you have a PCR test done within 72 hours and you're negative, it could happen, but it's very unlikely that you subsequently develop symptoms unless you picked up COVID while in Nigeria.
Well, speak to us about this information that was given to us at yesterday's briefing by the Minister for Health when he talked about 587 persons in Kano dying as a result of COVID-19. That figure has not been released in the latest NCDC figures. Could you bring us up to speed about what that is about? Is it a direct consequence of COVID-19 or they are just circumstantial around it?
I really don't have the full details. I haven't received a copy of the report. The PGF has not formally received the report from the Honorable Minister. I believe he will be presenting the formal report to us, so we'll have that detail. But certainly at the moment, I don't have the full details to be able to categorically say to you whether the 580 were directly responsible. But even having said that, the way we count COVID cases is based on the test itself. It's not based on the clinical features. So if we say Kano, for instance, has 1,000 cases of COVID, these are 1,000 cases that were diagnosed based on the PCR. Even where people have died and you do what we call verbal audits, verbal postmortem, and you find that the symptoms are consistent, provided a test has not been done, we cannot conclusively say that they were COVID cases and therefore they cannot count and they cannot come into the national count.
Should the results come back and say that it's a direct consequence of COVID-19, does that mean that we'll have those figures added to the national figures?
No. So unless a sample was taken from those persons, no. The way we count based on the surveillance is actually based on PCR diagnosis. In this country, we don't use symptomatic diagnosis. So in China, for instance, if you remember when they were about, I think, a few months into their pandemic, they changed the definition and they brought in people that had symptoms consistent with COVID because they stopped testing everybody. So people presenting with fever, cough, and pneumonia, severe respiratory illness were brought into the definition and the numbers increased. But certainly for Nigeria, as far as I know at the moment, we use the PCR test. So unless somebody who's deceased had a sample taken after death and the sample comes up positive, we wouldn't put that case because it's not confirmed.
All right, then, Dr. Sani Aliyu, thank you for talking to us this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you.